How did a woman in 1956 know exactly where to dig to find ancient Egyptian ruins? She claimed that she had personally been there over 3,000 years earlier. Her name was Dorothy Eady, and the site was discovered exactly how she said it would be. Ancient tree stumps, irrigation channels, and a well that still held water. Well, records show that this woman out of time had an extremely interesting childhood. She was born on January 16, 1904, to Reuben and Carolyn Eady. And from a very early age, she carried within her this strange longing, so deep, so specific, that it frightened her parents. She would sit for hours, tears streaming down her face, repeating the same heartbreaking plea over and over again. "I want to go home." But no matter how many times her mother gently told her, "But darling, you are home," Dorothy would only cry harder. Something inside of her knew differently. Something inside of her remembered another home, a place of towering columns, fragrant gardens, and a life lived in a completely different culture. Interestingly, though, her strange memories of this foreign life didn't emerge until after she fell down the stairs and died.
Welcome to Velarcana. Here we share mysteries that often defy explanation. I research the cases, and my husband tells the stories.
From the time that Dorothy was born until her accident, she was just this ordinary young girl. Then, one fateful day in 1907, when she was just 3 years old, she took this terrible tumble down the stairs. Her mother watched in horror from the upper landing as Dorothy lay motionless at the bottom. Well, the doctor was sent for, and after examining her and finding that she had no pulse and she wasn't breathing, he pronounced little Dorothy dead. Well, after that, her body was carried to her room, and the doctor went to prepare the death certificate. Just about an hour later, he returned, and when he entered the bedroom, he froze in disbelief. Instead of a dead little girl, he found Dorothy sitting up in bed, chocolate smeared all over her face, playing happily as if nothing had happened. The stunned doctor examined her again, found no trace of injury, tore up the death certificate, and swore to the parents that that little girl had been dead. Well, the dreams began right after that. Night after night, she dreamt the same thing. This magnificent building with great stone columns, a lush garden heavy with fruit and bright flowers, tall trees swaying under a brilliant blue sky. She could even smell the blossoms and feel the warm stones beneath her bare feet. And every morning, she would wake with the same ache, this crushing certainty that she no longer belonged in the gray, overcast world of 20th century London. Her parents watched their bright, headstrong daughter with growing concern. Nothing they said or did could comfort this child who insisted with absolute conviction that she belonged someplace else. Then came the day that would bring the dreams to life. When Dorothy was just 4 years old, her parents took her to the British Museum. The moment that they entered the Egyptian galleries, the little girl changed completely. She tore her hands free from her parents' grip and she began running wildly through the rooms. She dropped to her knees before every statue with solemn reverence, and for the ones that she could reach, she'd respectfully stretch forward and kiss their stone feet. Finally, she stopped in front of a glass case containing a mummy, sat down on the cold floor, and refused to move. When her very confused mother tried to pick her up, Dorothy grabbed the edge of the case and, in a voice that sounded nothing like a young child, a strange, ancient voice that sent chills down her mother's spine, she declared, "Leave me. These are my people." No doubt, this incident was intense, and it left Mrs. Eady badly shaken. But it was only the beginning. A few months later, Dorothy's father brought home a child's encyclopedia. The moment that Dorothy flipped through the pages and saw the photographs of ancient Egypt, her entire face changed. She pressed her small hands against the pictures as if she were trying to reach through the paper, reach through time. Then she came to a full-page photo of a ruined temple. The caption read, "The Temple of Seti I at Abydos, Upper Egypt." Dorothy pulled the magazine close to her chest and ran to her father and shouted with absolute certainty, "This is my home. This is where I used to live." She stared at the broken columns with sorrow in her eyes, since she asked the question that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Why is it all broken? Where is the garden? As Dorothy grew older, her obsession only deepened, and at the age of 10, she began skipping school to spend hours alone in the Egyptian galleries of the British Museum. And it was there that fate introduced her to one of the greatest Egyptologists of the age, Sir E.A. Wallace Budge, keeper of Egyptian and Assyrian antiquities. Budge took an interest in this unusual little girl, and he agreed to teach her hieroglyphics. To his astonishment, Dorothy proved to be way more than just an ordinary student. She absorbed the complex writing system with crazy, unnatural speed. She quickly learned to read and write hundreds of hieroglyphic characters, and soon she began deciphering passages from the Egyptian Book of the Dead. When the puzzled scholar asked her, "How in the world are you able to learn so much, so fast?" the 10-year-old looked him calmly in the eyes, and she gave the same answer she had been giving her parents for years. "I didn't learn this. I simply forgot it. And now, finally, it's all coming back to me." But the true depth of Dorothy Eady's impossible memories had not yet been revealed. No, that revelation would come one terrifying night when a figure from 3,000 years in the past somehow stepped out of time and into her life. One night, when Dorothy was 14 years old, she was awakened by this heavy weight on her chest. While half awake, she opened her eyes, and bending over her was the face of Seti I. His hand was gripping the neck of her nightgown like this, while she recognized him instantly, and a shock of astonishment, terror, and joy all rushed to her at the same time, and she cried out. And at that very moment, he ripped her nightgown clean open. Well, her mother, sleeping in the next room, heard her cry, and she rushed in. "What's the matter?" she asked. Dorothy, trying to sound calm, replied, "Nothing. I just had a nightmare." But her mom noticed her ripped nightgown. "Well, what's up with the nightgown?" And Dorothy said that, well, she must have done it while she was dreaming. But of course, she knew the truth. But she couldn't say that Seti I had actually come into her room, stared into her eyes, and then ripped her nightgown, right? No one would believe that. She would later describe this moment by saying that his face was the dead face of a mummy, but his eyes were filled with the look of someone who had suddenly just found a way out of hell. His arms moved, his hands moved, but he never said anything. From that night forward, she kept hoping that he would return, and she was still having those dreams of the ancient world. In one of them, she saw herself as a young Egyptian woman, lying on a mat in an enormous room filled with other women. A very old man carrying a lamp entered the room, peering nearsightedly to ensure that everyone was in place. Then the scene abruptly shifted to an underground chamber surrounded by a channel of water. The floor was covered in small polished stones, from carnelian to turquoise. And at the center of it all, there was the statue of a man, reclining as if he were in eternal rest. And Dorothy found herself dressed in ancient Egyptian clothing and being stared at disappointingly by a high priest who kept bombarding her relentlessly with questions. Why did you break your vow? Did you think that God would not find out? When she refused to answer, he would beat her with this baton-like stick. The pain felt so real that it would knock her out of her dream, and she'd wake up, screaming. Unknown to her at the time, that underground chamber perfectly matched descriptions of the Osirian. That's a massive, mysterious structure that's immediately behind Seti's temple at Abydos. These dreams didn't feel like random fantasies. No, they felt more like buried memories resurfacing, pulling her toward a truth that she couldn't yet fully understand. Well, years passed, and Dorothy immersed herself in Egyptology, mastering hieroglyphics and ancient texts. Then, in 1933, at 29 years old, she married an Egyptian man named Imam and moved to Cairo. Soon they had a son, whom she insisted on naming Seti, earning her the name Omm Sety, or Mother of Seti. The marriage strained under her obsessions. Shortly after arriving in Egypt, Seti I, remember him when she was 14? Well, he began appearing to her again, this time not as a mummy. No, now he was appearing as a normal human male. Once, while Dorothy's mother was visiting her and Imam, Dorothy's husband, was away, Dorothy's mother asked, "Who was that man in your room last night?" Well, Dorothy told her that it was Seti I, and her mother filled up with anxiety because there really was a man in Dorothy's room that night. This was no longer just something in Dorothy's mind, and she urged Dorothy to leave Egypt. "Your dreams are becoming too real. This is definitely not a safe place for you to be in." But Dorothy wouldn't even consider that. She felt closer to home here and now than she ever had in her life. Well, Seti continued to appear to her, and then things got even stranger. During the second year of their marriage, on full moon nights, her husband, Imam, would wake up to find Dorothy rising in a trance-like state. She'd walk in her sleep so smoothly that at times he couldn't tell if she were walking or floating. Well, she would make it to her desk by the window, sit down and start writing by moonlight. She wrote in hieroglyphics, as if someone were dictating a story. Later, she described the feeling as being half-conscious, neither awake nor asleep, as if she were under some sort of a spell and hearing a man's voice. The entity called himself Hora, and he dictated slowly night after night. But not every night. No, there would often be times where there would be long gaps in between. He seemed reluctant, bored even, loathing the task. Yet he was compelled to fulfill it. In the mornings, Dorothy would read what had been written the night before, and more often than not, the writings felt vague, but over time, they began to build a picture. Eventually, 70 pages emerged, and they told the story of a young woman's life from ancient Egypt. The woman's name was Bentreshyt, meaning harp of joy. Her mother died when she was very young, and her father was a soldier. So, unable to raise her, her father placed her in the Temple of Seti in the holy city of Abydos to train as a priestess. There, she took the vow of virginity so that she could serve the goddess Isis and participate in the sacred mystery play of Osiris. Well, one morning, while she was picking flowers and singing softly in the garden, Pharaoh Seti I passed by, and he heard her voice, and he found her absolutely stunning. So he called her over. Charmed by her clumsy bow, he laughed, asked her name, and then learned that she was an orphan studying to be a priestess. Well, the pharaoh just stopped, completely paralyzed by her beauty. Bentreshyt, turning several shades of red, found him extremely intense, yet handsome and kind. But she also remembered that she had taken a vow of virginity, and even this little bit of flirting was wrong. Well, that first meeting sparked something inside of both of them, something that they just couldn't resist, and their forbidden romance had begun, one that unfortunately would end in tragedy. And by now, I'm sure that you've already guessed that Dorothy believed that she was the reincarnation of Bentreshyt, and the love that had cost Bentreshyt her life in ancient times was now somehow reaching across the millennia, trying to latch on to Dorothy. Well, the full heartbreaking details of this affair were about to unfold in ways that no one would believe. The forbidden romance that had ended in tragedy 3,000 years earlier seemingly wasn't over. Apparently, it was somehow reaching across time, pulling Dorothy deeper and deeper into a destiny that she seemed powerless to resist. Her obsession with ancient Egypt consumed more and more of her time, and by the mid-1930s, the strain was just too much for her marriage, and in 1936, she and her husband divorced. Well, Dorothy moved to an apartment on the Giza Plateau, where she had a perfect view of the pyramids and the Sphinx. And she was hired by the Egyptian Department of Antiquities as the first woman ever to be a draftsman, or I guess, in this case, a draftswoman, right? Her job was to map and record temple reliefs, but she quickly became much more. When she wasn't working, she spent hours in the libraries of the Cairo Museum studying ancient texts. Due to her position, she was allowed to enter the Great Pyramids at night, which gave her experiences that deepened her spiritual encounters immensely. Well, time went on and she continued her career, becoming research assistant to renowned archaeologists, patiently training for 19 years in Cairo, Giza, and Saqqara. While working on excavations, she displayed a remarkable ability to just fill in missing details of texts and inscriptions. She was so good at cataloging and fitting together sculptured fragments of tombs that fellow Egyptologists were often puzzled by her inexplicable insights. Sometimes it really did feel like she had just been there before. Occasionally, she'd have the opportunity to work in Abydos, where 3,000 years earlier, as Bentreshyt, she took a vow of virginity. Now, as Dorothy, she was terrified of spending any serious time in Abydos.
Whenever Dorothy began to think seriously of moving permanently to Abydos, she herself realized that at that point she would once again become temple property and be subject to the religious laws that would make it impossible for her to continue her passionate affair with the man she loved. Because of this, she found any number of reasons to miss her train.
See, Dorothy was still meeting with Seti I. Remember? Her mother saw him in her room that night all those years ago. Well, shortly after that, a young priest from ancient Egypt appeared in her room and pulled her into her astral body. She woke up suddenly, sat up, and felt herself expanding into this strange world of light. Before long, she was looking down at her physical body, which she saw as unappealing and overweight. However, in the astral world, she was naked and beautiful. She followed this priest through this patch of black, thick fog. And on the other side waited Seti I, handsome and powerful. Well, they developed a strong, passionate love affair where they met and loved often in this astral world. Each encounter left her drained but exhilarated. Seti I was her ghostly lover, her invisible companion, her soulmate reunited across time. Moving to and working in Abydos would mean the end of these astral visits, but it would also be a chance at redemption. Seti told her that they had to make things right. What they did all of those years ago would haunt them throughout all of time unless they fixed it. If she would return to Abydos, work to preserve the temple, and fulfill her vow of virginity, then she could be with Seti properly in the afterlife for all of eternity. So in 1952, she made her first visit. The moment that she saw the Temple of Ramses II, she realized that this was indeed the place that she had envisioned as a teenager. Interestingly, while she was there, she found this hidden well with amazingly clear water. Unable to read or write at the time without glasses, something compelled her to wash her eyes in this sacred water. From that day forward, according to her and several other people, she rarely used glasses again. A woman with her, the wife of an antiques inspector, suffered from an incurable eye disease that prevented her from opening her eyes very widely in strong light. Dorothy told her about the water. Well, the woman didn't believe it at first, but her husband persuaded her to at least give it a try. Less than a half an hour later, while walking through the desert toward Ramses' temple, she cried out, "Oh my God, I can see!" And the cure was permanent. In 1956, Dorothy was offered a full-time job in Abydos. She moved there, officially changed her name to Omm Sety, and began working directly in the Temple of Seti I. And it was while she worked there that she stunned professional archaeologists and the world. She had long insisted that a lush garden once flourished southwest of the temple. Trees, a lotus pool, jasmine, oleander, pomegranate, date, palms, sycamores. Now, keep in mind that there was no surface evidence at all that anything like that had ever existed there. Yet she described the layout perfectly. So, skeptical archaeologists followed her instructions and dug. And wouldn't you know it, they uncovered the stumps of ancient trees, vines, roots, watering channels, and the foundations of that garden. Exactly where she said it would be. The odds were 1,000,000 to 1, like someone winning the lottery. Then she pointed to the northern exterior of the temple and insisted that a subterranean passage and rooms lay buried beneath that area as well. Well, excavators changed their location and dug, and they discovered, just as she had described, a passage and a series of rooms had indeed existed there as well, and had been filled in over time. According to Dorothy, these were not guesses, though they were memories. Of course, they led to discoveries that baffled experts, and still do to this day. But the deepest revelations, the intimate details of her love affair with Seti I, the reason why she had to give up her life 3,000 years ago, well, all of that would be fully revealed in those late-night, moonlit writings that had been dictated to her by Hora. Through the 70 pages of hieroglyphs that Hora dictated to her over the course of that year, Dorothy finally learned the story of her previous life. Her name had been Bentreshyt. She had been born to humble parents, and her mother died when she was just 2 years old. Her father, being a soldier and not knowing what else to do, he placed her in that temple where she swore that vow of virginity. And meeting Seti I was the beginning of the end for this poor girl, because not only did they start that love affair, but she got pregnant, and when she did, disaster loomed. The high priest Antif interrogated her in those underground chambers of the Osirian, and when she refused to name her lover, well, he beat her with that stick. Realizing the scandal would absolutely destroy Seti if discovered, Bentreshyt made the ultimate sacrifice, moving on to the afterlife in order to protect the man that she loved. Well, for 3,000 years, Seti I never forgot what she had done for him, and now in the 20th century, he had found her again. The love affair never truly ended. After moving to Abydos and taking the name Omm Sety, the visitations intensified. Although the romance was put on hold, the feelings never were. Omm Sety lived out her days in a small mud brick house beside the temple that she loved, performing the ancient rituals and assisting archaeologists. Seti appeared to her on a regular basis, sometimes in astral form, and sometimes he fully materialized as a flesh and blood living man in the physical world. They would talk for hours. He shared all types of secrets from the ancient world. He told her that the Osirian was far older than his reign, and so was the Sphinx. This was her soulmate, her eternal companion, the man that she had died for 3 millennia earlier, and the man who had crossed time itself to be with her again. Omm Sety died on April 21st, 1981, and she was buried facing west, the direction of the afterlife in ancient Egypt. So, what are we to make of this extraordinary mystery? Skeptics offer several compelling explanations. They point out that Dorothy Eady became obsessively immersed in Egyptology from the age of 4. She spent decades studying under experts, reading every available text, and working directly on excavations. Many of her so-called memories could very well have just been the result of cryptomnesia. That's forgotten information rising to the surface and feeling as if it is personal recollections. Others suggest that severe head trauma from her childhood fall just might have triggered this profound psychological change, creating this rich fantasy life that felt absolutely real to her. Many people believe that she was just schizophrenic. Some note that many of the most dramatic stories came with absolutely no way to verify them. Her journeys into the astral world, meeting Seti I, things like that. But even hardened Egyptologists who worked with her admitted that she did indeed point out archaeological features and the location of the temple garden with uncanny accuracy that lies way outside of statistical chance. She lived a disciplined, dedicated life among the ruins, respected by professionals who had every reason to doubt her. And the emotional consistency of her story? The love, the guilt, the longing. Well, that never wavered over nearly 80 years of her life. In the end, this story forces us to confront some of humanity's oldest and most haunting questions, right? Is love stronger than death? Can consciousness exist outside of flesh, blood, space, or time? What if two souls can find each other again and again and again across the vastness of eternity? I'll tell you what, and you can go ahead and think that I'm crazy. Many people already do. But in my mind, that's exactly how it is. Nothing can separate me from the love that I have for Amy. She is my soulmate, and I know that I've been with her for all of eternity. Perhaps Dorothy Eady was simply a woman with an extraordinary imagination. Or perhaps, just perhaps, some loves are written in eternal stone, and no amount of time can erase them.
This one was romantic. A love affair, unbounded by space or time. Seti I crossing millennia to be with the woman he loved. And then Damon saying all that stuff about me, that really touched me. I had no idea he was going to say that until he finished filming his parts. We were editing them, and then, of course, it was my turn to film. You guys know I feel the same about him. He really is my soulmate. So, enough of that. What did you guys think about this one? How did it compare to the hauntings and alien stories that we've shared? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I am super curious. And please consider liking, sharing, and possibly jumping over to buy me a coffee. Support us over there. It really does help. Thank you so much.